More than 5,000 citizens have raised their objections to the Road Accident Fund Amendment Bill. The Department of Transport published the amendment on the 8th of September, and it moves away from compensation to a social benefits structure. This will impact drivers, passengers and pedestrians in claiming compensation for injuries. Chairperson of the Personal Injury Plaintiff Lawyers Association, Advocate Justin Erasmus, joins me now to unpack this further and to help us understand what exactly this change would mean if implemented. Good evening to you, Advocate. Thank you very much for joining us here on Newsnight.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
My absolute pleasure. So your organization represents hundreds and hundreds of personal injury lawyers. Let me just get your initial reaction to the proposed changes to this bill.
Well, we're shocked, and it's not just us and our members. We're working collaboratively with the Law Society of South Africa, Black Lawyers Association. There's a number of organizations. Across the board, everyone is shocked. And what shocks us is the drastic restriction. It's phrased as a shift to benefits, but what it amounts to is the wholesale taking away of existing rights from road accident victims and replacing it with something of a much, much, much lower value.
Let's get into what some of these changes would mean, because we know it hasn't been implemented as yet.
Yes.
I think that considerations are still open until the 6th of October.
It's still the 8th, but the 8th is a Sunday, so effectively we have until the 6th. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the first point, and that would be loss of earnings and the payout system moving from a lump sum to a different strategy. Talk us through what that means.
It's moving from currently a lump sum. You prove your loss of earnings and it's paid out as a lump sum. You have one accident, you hurt one time and you paid your lump sum. That is important because it allows people to use that lump sum to set up a little bit of business. It does things, for example, if they've got future medical expenses, those can be covered until the Road Accident Fund covers it. So the flexibility of a lump sum is critical to payment and to road accident victims. It's going to be replaced, if amendments pass, by annuity payments. They've not defined annuity, whether it'll be monthly or annually, but really what you will be is a type of pensioner. You'll receive small amount of payments. What's also terrible is that those payments are reviewable. That's the word it uses, depending on the situation of the Road Accident Fund. So that you don't have a once and for all situation. You awarded a certain amount by a court, you get that amount. You become instead you're going to be a pensioner, and that pension can be reduced at the whim of the fund, effectively.
And based off of your view or opinion, what would be the reason for wanting to implement this specific change?
I can only speculate, so
Sure.
I'm speculating. But my suspicion is because an annuity payment is not, it's a type of pension, it's not inheritable, so the money, it's delayed the payment of that money over time, and it also doesn't. Very often someone will predecease the period and then it'll be a saving to the fund. But that is, I can't tell you that as a fact, but that's my considered opinion.
I want to expand on this periodic review that you just briefly mentioned. For someone who's sitting at home and who maybe doesn't understand this, what exactly does that mean? What would that process possibly entail?
Well, it's not articulated properly in the legislation, but it opens the door. Whereas, as I said, now you're an awarded amount, you receive that amount. What the periodic review is, if they're having a cash flow problem, for example, or there's not money, or for whatever reason there is, they can look and say, well, we've only got so much money in the pot, we're reducing everybody's by a certain percent. But I can't talk to the mechanism of that review because it's not, it'll probably be published in a regulation or some such. It's not made clear in the document.
Another point is the issue of pain and suffering, and that could possibly fall away. Just talk to us about what exactly that means and what the difference would be.
Currently, if you have what's regarded as a serious injury, you're not going to get pain and suffering if you're just a little bit sore. But if you have a serious injury, you'll get for pain and suffering, loss of amenities. So what you would say in law is non-patrimonial damages. You get an award for that. That is gone. They will not be paid that anymore. To give you a practical example of what that means, if you are a person who was unemployed, so you don't have a loss of earnings, for example, just to make it simple, but you rendered a quadriplegic, you're sitting in a wheelchair, you've got bed sores under your legs, and you're suffering terribly, your life has been destroyed. The Road Accident Fund will maybe pay for the bandage. You're not going to get anything beyond that, because you're not going to get your loss of earnings, and if you do, it'll be in tiny amounts, and you're not going to get money for general damages. You could be suffering. You could be an active person, a sports person, enjoying life. That's gone and taken from you. As I say, you'll maybe get treatment for your bed sores if it is authorized in advance.
And there would be no possible legal way around that?
No.
It would be set in stone?
Set in stone, and what you can say about that, and it applies to everything in this Act, is your rights of that are limited, but you can't even sue the person that hit you. So the Road Accident Fund is saying, well, we're standing in the shoes of the wrongdoer. We're only going to give you this limited benefit, and you can't look to the person who did you that wrong for the balance.
Wow.
So the protection of road accident victims has been just, in that regard, has been just stripped away totally, and it's not been replaced with anything.
I want to expand on a line that I saw in your press release talking about the place of incident and how certain rights will fall away if the accident doesn't happen on a public road. What exactly does this mean?
It's another. I'm sorry if I keep using the word shocking, but it is.
It is quite shocking.
Currently, you can be compensated for the negligent driving of a motor vehicle wherever it happens.
Sure.
Now it will have to be on a public road, and a public road is fairly narrowly defined. So to give you an example, if you you live in a townhouse development, you go through an access control point, there's roads, there's all sorts of things in there, cars travel around, but it's no longer a public road, you will get no cover at all, nothing. If you hit on a farm, nothing. So anything that is not public is you're not covered for. And we can sit here all evening and think of places that are not public. If you're hitting your driveway, it's not public. And linking onto that, another thing which really astounded me in the new Act is currently, if an unidentified vehicle hits you, you are covered. So someone pushes you off a road or whatever, you didn't get a number plate, you don't know who they are, you're no longer covered.
So what happens in a situation where you're driving down the road and a car hits you and speeds off? Because that is completely out of your control as a driver. You can't do anything.
I think you have no claim against the Road Accident Fund.
Wow. Okay. We must confirm again that these amendments haven't been implemented yet, but this is potentially what it could mean for every South African.
Another example I can give you, which I thought was crazy, is if you're a pedestrian, let me take a step back. They are not liable to pay a claim if you have more than the legal alcohol limit of blood in your blood. That includes pedestrians. So you could go out with your friends, you could have 2 or 3 beers. You're doing the responsible thing, you didn't drive, you phoned an Uber. You're standing on the pavement doing nothing, waiting for your Uber. Somebody drives their car over that pavement and into you. You will not be able to claim if the law passes.
Advocate, I'm interested to find out how these amendments are got to. What goes into making these changes? What goes into making these decisions that will impact the lives of all South Africans so greatly?
Well, this is a big issue we have. There's been no public consultation that I'm aware of on how these amendments were got to. The amendments were published in a government gazette on a Friday afternoon 2 weeks ago, and there was a month given for public comment. So how they got to it and why they're wanting to rush it through to the parliamentary committee, I can't tell you. But there was, to the best of my knowledge, no public participation in this process. None of our organizations are aware of any, and I should just add that not all of our organizations are lawyers. There's the South African Medical Legal Association, there's doctors and all sorts of a diverse array of people, and nobody was consulted.
So what then do we do? How do we change this path of things? How do we as South Africans get involved? How do we make some sort of difference?
The critical first step is to be involved, and the easiest way to be involved is to lodge an objection with the Department of Transport. It's an easy thing to do. You can go either to Dear South Africa, that's dearsouthafrica.co.za, or you can go to myroadtrafficrights.org. Dear South Africa is particularly easy. It's non-partisan. You can go and say, I support the legislation. You can say, I don't support the legislation. It's done on an online form, and that will be then transmitted for you to the Department of Transport. So I would urge all South Africans, even if you agree with this piece of legislation, to go and have your say, be an active citizen, takes 5 minutes of your time.
Advocate Erasmus, thank you very much for your time. I think it's a very important conversation to have, so I appreciate your insights. I also appreciate you creating awareness and sharing your knowledge. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure. Well, that was the chairperson of the Personal Injury Plaintiff Lawyers Association, Advocate Justin Erasmus, talking to us about the proposed amendments when it comes to the Road Accident Fund Amendment Bill. So South Africans have until the 6th of October to share our views. A lot of changes that will affect all of South Africans if injured on the roads in South Africa if this bill is then, if these amendments rather, are signed into law. But very interesting.